There are so many layers to a divorce, and adjusting to change is probably one of the most difficult. Special occasions like Father's Day often prove to be emotionally challenging, particularly in the immediate years following the separation. Dr. Julia Gowthorpe is a psychotherapist and family counselor, and the author of Tainted Love: Why Your Ex is Making You Miserable and What You Can Do About It. She's here to share strategies to guide you through the tough times. Doctor, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
First, let's talk a little bit about divorce rates. Are they as high as they used to be?
Yes, we know that about 50%, a little higher than that, of marriages end in divorce in the U.S.
So when the family dynamic changes, problems could arise. What typically do you see?
Well, problems arise when people stay in conflict. So the emotional volatility of the situation is really heightened. So we want people to just slow things down a little bit and be able to step back and use their brains to drive the divorce bus as opposed to the emotions.
Right?
Yes.
All right. Well, you have some strategies for keeping kids of divorce happy, but we're also talking about holidays here. It's Father's Day weekend. That's got to be difficult to kind of juggle it if you're part of a newly divorced family.
Right. And you just pointed that out, particularly when you're newly divorced. It's any holidays or occasions
or weddings for that matter.
Yes,
right?
They're challenging, right? When the dynamics change, roles change, expectations of people change, and it can become more complicated. So Father's Day is an example of that.
All right, so we'll talk a little bit about the children, how to keep everybody happy as best we can. Remember that children love both parents, so you don't want to turn on your husband in front of your child, I would assume, or your ex-husband.
That's right, and you know, even if we look at separation itself is challenging, and it's got that whole litigious nature of it as well, right? So when people go that route and they're engaged in litigation and letters are going back and forth, a lot of mudslinging can happen.
Sure.
And we just want to remind parents that, you know, your kids are part of both of you and they love you. And we also know that when kids hear negative things or they sense that negativity, they're at higher risk of things like depression, anxiety, behavioral problems, school-related issues.
So probably watch the bad mouthing. It goes hand in hand, right?
Right.
All right. Parenting is forever. You mentioned that. The kids are going to love both sides.
That's right, and they should. And so what we want parents to do for their kids is to value that parent-child relationship. No matter how you feel about your former spouse, you have to value that parent-child relationship.
And you say even encourage time with your ex-spouse.
Absolutely. And by showing, that's part of valuing it, right? So if you're encouraging that time, you're not trying to limit it, and you're really wanting that other parent to play an active role with their kids, you can show that just by saying positive things and also making that access or time happen.
Okay, and children worry, even if they don't appear it. They're probably thinking about the separation.
That's right.
And that's probably difficult for them to deal with.
It is, and that's why we want to allow open conversation with our kids about how they're feeling. And you know, there's such long-term effects for kids that have gone through divorce when it hasn't been handled well. It's very challenging. It's hard on their sense of self, and it's hard on them in terms of developing other relationships as well.
I mean, and it's not just young children we're talking about. Young adults can be affected the same way.
Absolutely, because when I talked about, you know, expectations that people have of their parents, and we expect our parents to be there for us and put our needs first, so it's very important, regardless of how old your children are, to be able to do divorce in a real positive way.
All right, and a key factor here you mentioned seems obvious, but I guess if you're in a battle, Father's Day should be spent with your father, Mother's Day should be spent with mothers.
Right, right, and that's why it's really important, you know, in the early stages to think about this stuff. So, you know, when you develop a parenting plan, or you're trying to come up with what the access schedule or time schedule is going to look like between the parents, consider these important days. So that's Father's Day, like you said, should be with Dad, Mother's Day with Mom, and then there's no argument about it in the future.
Makes sense. Children have one world. All they really are looking for is for unconditional love.
That's right. So let's not divide up their world for them. You know, I've had one dad said to me, you know, when my son comes home, I just tell him, "You're home now. What happened over there? We don't need to hear about it, and I don't want to talk about it." But for that child, that requires him to then divide things up. Okay, what's okay for me to talk about here? What do I need to talk about when I'm with Mom? And that just puts so much stress on him, and he may not even tell Dad that he's feeling that way.
All right, and of course the day should be child-focused. You shouldn't be arguing on Father's Day or Mother's Day.
That's right, or any time of the year, right?
That makes sense.
It's, again, think about your child before you speak. You know, I talk about, you know, first of all, know the information about separation and divorce and how it affects kids, and then act on it in a very purposeful way so that you're very careful about what you expose your kids to directly and indirectly.
All right, and then lastly, parents need to be healthy for their children. Seems kind of makes sense, obvious, right?
Right, and that's one of the key factors we know for kids is that when parents do well, kids do well. If mom or dad is really upset all the time and not functioning well, kids suffer.
And doctor, let me ask you, what happens if the child doesn't want to see the other father, the mother, the ex-spouse?
That's when things become very contentious. So first of all, you want to get your child the opportunity to speak with someone neutral about that so the child can process what they're going through. And for the adults involved, you want the adult to say, how can I support this relationship continuing?
Very good. The name of the book again is Tainted Love. Doctor, where can we find it?
You can find it at any of your major online booksellers as well as in some local bookstores.
Very good. Thanks for the information.
Thank you.